So I'm going to show you what you need to look at when it comes to decreasing the cost per lead for your business. I wanted to start off with a Miro board and just go through exactly the things you need to take into consideration when trying to improve performance in an account, or in this case, decreasing cost per lead. So for some context, this particular client gives us quarterly referral targets. And for Q2 of this year, these were the targets. Now, obviously, I've had to blank out the services and the regions, but you'll still get the point. So straight away, these are the referral targets per service, and then this is the total target across the quarter. So they were looking to achieve, roughly 2,400 referrals, and the media spend was approximately $90,000 for the 3 months. Now, they also gave us the focus priority as a percentage, right? So they wanted, service 4 to have 36% of the focus, service 1, 38%, and so on. They also did the same for the regions. So the regions had also a priority in terms of focus. So you can see region 4 had a 44% focus. And this is for service 1. So the splits actually differed dependent on the service. Okay, so service 2, 3, and 4 had slightly different focuses when it came to splits. But the point is at a top level, these were the targets for the client. And then it's about interpreting these and then actioning an appropriate strategy, or an appropriate strategy to achieve these results. But it's also important to take into consideration that these goals or targets are for the entire business, and it'd be unreasonable for us to say we can achieve 100% of these targets from Google Ads, because we can't. So how do we actually estimate the paid targets? So in this scenario, this is what I've done, right? So this is the targets that I came up with, and I'll show you exactly how I came up with these targets in the after this in the Google Sheet. So you can see that I was saying in total we can generate 917 referrals. So out of the 2,400, I estimated we could achieve 917, which meant the remaining 1,473 would come from other channels, such as organic search and etc., and the offline activity. So that would give us a cost per lead of around $98, right? That's what our target was, and I also included the brand referrals as well, which was a big, I guess a big driver. But this is really important to have. Actually, if you go back to one of my videos, I explain the importance of running brand search. A lot of businesses think, oh, why run brand search? Because you'll pick it up through organic listings. But in reality, that doesn't always happen. So if you want to see that case study, I'll link it in the description, but that will show you why I'm prioritizing brand, because it's very important. So those are the targets that I came up with. Now I'm going to show you exactly how I came up with these targets, which allowed me to get a 15% decrease in cost per lead, in cost per lead. So what I've done is, let me show you, I put this sheet together. Now, this sheet was for Q2 of 2024. And I want to show you this first, because this will really, highlight how I was able to decrease cost per leads by around 15% in 2025. But this is important context. So basically how I came up with these targets more or less, if I go to this sheet, what I do is basically I say, okay, well, let's go into the Google Ads account and let's have a look at the previous months or previous quarters metrics, right? So for this particular service, I've gone in and I'm like, okay, this is the focus priority per region. And then obviously this is also, per region, right? And I also take into consideration the priority focus per service. And I say, okay, well, last quarter we had a CPM of this per region. And then, we had a CTR of this, conversion rate of this, CTR, etc. And I do that for each service and also region. And then based on this, it gives me an estimation in terms of how many referrals I believe we can drive. So you'll see that service 1, 210, service 2, 580. And then in total, I estimated roughly 902 referrals we could achieve in this period just from paid search. Now, let me show you how we did in this quarter. And I want to focus on service 2. So service 2, we actually didn't hit our target. We hit 239 referrals or conversions out of the target of 580, which is a big, I guess it's a big gap, right? And this was a good learning experience that I took these findings into Q2 of 2025, which then allowed us to really smash the targets, which I'll get into, right? But the key learning here was it's not fair to just go to the prior month or the prior quarter and say, these were the metrics, like this was the CPM, this was the conversion rate, this was the CTR, and let's just apply it to this quarter. And the reason being is, first of all, seasonality and diminishing returns. These two concepts are very important. It's not as simple as saying, okay, if we have a CPL of $87 across last quarter, if we go and spend additional $20,000, we'll be able to generate an additional 50% or 20% of conversions, right? Because that's assuming cost per lead stays static. It stays the same. But anyone who knows digital marketing, that doesn't happen. Increased spend typically leads to increased cost per leads because of diminishing returns. And that was the biggest learning. So that's what I did here. And I assumed that cost per lead would just stay the same magically, and we can just invest more money. But as you can see, I estimated a cost per lead of $87 and assumed a conversion rate of 8% roughly. And then if you go and have a look at the actual end of the period or end of the quarter, cost per lead went up to $144. So that didn't go to plan. Why? Diminishing returns. And that's what I want to quickly show you before I get into showing you the results and showing you how I managed to, improve performance. So let me go back to this Miro board and show you in this. So this is really, really important. Okay. And this is actually using this particular client's data and having a look at seasonality. I'm not going to get into how I did this, but the point is this showed me how CPMs increase during certain periods and how that correlates with conversion rate. And this is using like 3 years of data and me just getting the average. So you can see July to November, CPMs actually increase. What does that mean? That means this period has increased competition. All right, higher CPMs typically mean more competition. So it's a more competitive period. And then you can see kind of as we get into the, I guess, less competitive periods, conversion rates start to come up, right? And then they start to go down. But during this period, conversion rates, fall below average because it's just so competitive, right? And I didn't take this into consideration in 2024 when I did the modeling or forecasting. And this is a very important concept. You need to understand seasonality because this will allow you to understand when and where to spend your money. And this is, and why is this so important, right? Well, let me show you this graph that I put together just to highlight diminishing returns, okay? So here you can see kind of the concept of diminishing returns. And this is a very, very linear, simple graph that I put together. It would probably be a little more complicated than this when it comes to, you know, diminishing returns in your account. But just for example purposes, this gets the point across. And that is, you can see spend rising, okay? And then you can see it's not linear, right? So as spend rises, conversion rates start to kind of plateau and CPL starts to increase. And that's diminishing returns, right? And what I was saying, I was assuming cost per lead would stay flat. And then by just spending, by increasing spend from 10K to 40K, that would correlate to an equal or linear increase in conversion volume. But that's not the case. And you can see as conversions rise, CPL starts to increase as well because the conversion volume isn't increasing at the same rate as spend, leading to increased cost per leads, right? And why does this happen? Well, the reason this happens is because every single industry has a sweet spot, and every single industry eventually reaches a point of saturation. Okay. I can give you an example here using this graph. So at this point, let's just say there's, a total pool of 100 people in a given industry. That's your total available market, right? So in this case, you can see in January, right, we spent like $10,000 and our cost per lead was roughly, I think, like $100. And that's great, right? And then in March, so from January, February is also okay. And then in March, you can see, or in April, you can see diminishing returns. You can see deep CPL start to increase. And why does that happen, right? Well, as I said, you've got 100 people in a given market. Okay. And let's just say in January, you were spending an amount, right, that allowed you to roughly generate 50 conversions. Okay. And that's the sweet spot, right? Like you can spend $10,000 roughly and get a pretty modest CPL because the available market is still quite broad. There's still a lot of people after 50, right? But 50 is kind of that sweet spot. Now, the issue is once you start to spend more money, right? Well, Google is going to charge you more for a lead. And the reason why Google is going to charge you more for a lead is because the total available market's $100. Sorry, 100. 50 is kind of that sweet spot where you'll spend enough and you'll get, a good CPL and you'll get enough lead volume. But when you start spending more, and let's just say now you generate 70 leads, right? Well, what happens? Well, Google is going to charge you more because, well, more people are spending more money to get that additional lead volume. But the issue is more and more people are competing for that additional kind of 20% of lead volume, right? And therefore Google's going to charge you more money, right? And you can see it here, right? Like you can see March or around April, if we spend, like, what's this? If we spend $25, right? Our cost per lead goes from 100 to 150 and our lead volume only goes, from roughly 200 to like 220, right? And it's because that additional, more or less, let's just say 20% or whatever percentage it is very costly because Google is going to charge you more money because more people want that additional lead volume, right? And people are willing to spend more to get that additional, to get those additional leads. So the question for you, I probably explained that so poorly, but the question that you need to ask is, well, is it worth spending more money to get additional leads at a more expensive price? That's the question. And that's diminishing returns. And if the question is yes, because maybe your product's like it's worth thousands of dollars, then you can afford to spend more for a lead, right? And you can afford to buy more leads, right? In, I guess, that more competitive kind of space, right? And you can continue to spend more and more, and you'll see that lead CPL just continue to rise, right? Because more and more people are going to spend more, and the pool of available leads starts to diminish. Therefore, diminishing returns occur and cost per lead increases. So that was the dilemma for this client, essentially, right? It's like, yeah, it's not as simple as saying CPL is constant. It's not stable. CPL always rises when you try to spend more because of that. So now let me show you the 2025 forecast that I put together. So in this scenario, I forecasted it very differently. Okay. And I said for service two, well, if we want to spend like $30,000, right? Well, your cost per lead is going to go up by $140, right? And if you go back and have a look at this Q4, right? Sorry, 2024 Q2, and you have a look at the actual data here, I've used seasonal data. I've gone back to Q2 of 2024, had a look at that service, had a look at those regions, and it was great because I had data. In 2023, we didn't have this available data, so it was much more difficult. But in this scenario, we did. And I've said, okay, well, if we spend 30K, we can expect an uplift of a CPL of X amount. And in this scenario, I've kind of used this as a benchmark, 144. And I've said, okay, well, your cost per lead is going to increase to roughly 140 if you want to spend $31,000. Now, if you want to spend 34, then this might rise by an additional $5 based off that seasonality. Okay. And then obviously your conversion rate changes and etc. And that's what I did. So I was very, very careful, and I was very, I was quite data driven when it came to forecasting this using the seasonality, or using seasonality, taking seasonality into account and applying that. So now if we go to the Google Ads account, okay, first of all, right, you have a look at the period and you go down and you can see, okay, well, cost slightly decreased, conversion volume increased slightly, right, more or less held, but it was consistent. And then as a result, you can see cost per lead actually, not conversion rate, cost per lead actually decreased by 15%. Okay, and it was using that, and that's the most important thing, I would say. Like when you have a sheet like this, like when I'm managing this account, I'm in that Google sheet more than I'm in this account, because that Google Sheets, it uses supermetrics and pulls in data in real time, and I can just actively see how we're tracking against our forecast, right? And here you can kind of see it, like this is kind of the conversion pacing, right? So it shows us we're pacing at 100%, which is perfect, and that means we've hit our target. 107% means we've actually surpassed our target or exceeded our target. So that's what I do. I go in here and I'm like, okay, well, this particular service is down by 77%. Well, we need to go and spend more money. So we can take away spend from here because we've already exceeded our target. Then we can add that additional spend here to make sure we hit our target. And that's very difficult to do just looking at Google Ads data or just looking at your Google Ads account. But having this sheet, and it allows you to visualize things so much easier. And that's why I'm in this sheet a lot more than I'm actually in the account, right? But going back to the account, there was one last thing that I wanted to show you. and it was on that diminishing returns bit. So let me just get rid of the comparison, and let's go to the last, I don't know, let's go to like the last year more or less. And then if we go segment time by month, I'm going to show you something. Go down. Cool. Total account. And this is what I want to show you. So first of all, if you scroll, let me scroll left, you see cost. So look at cost, conversions, and like CPL, and even conversion rate. So here, what I want to show you is the relationship between spend and kind of like cost per conversion to an extent, right? So you can see December, we spent the most, right? So October, 28K, CPL roughly around like $88. Our cost actually decreased to $25,000 here, and our CPL also decreased. Then in December, we decided to spend, $10,000 more, and our cost per lead increased significantly to 127. And then, so on, you can see spend decreases, cost per lead decreases, right? And, of course, as I said, you need to take seasonality into consideration as well. Like this period, January to June, as I showed you in that seasonal graph, is actually a less competitive period. So we can afford to spend more because CPMs are less, meaning it's less competitive, and therefore that impacts our cost per lead. So we're not going to spend as much as we would in the later end of the year because it's not as competitive. And that's why you can see kind of cost per leads, decreasing to a certain extent, right? Now, to be honest, it probably wasn't right to go and spend, 10K more in December based on those seasonal trends to an extent, right? As well, like probably didn't realize that and did the seasonal analysis after that. But now I know, right? And you learn from experience. And this is why having data in an account is so important, because you can then go and leverage it and figure out what the trends are, right? So yeah, I just wanted to show you that because this is showing that in real time, the kind of relationship between spend and cost per lead. Cost per lead will always rise with increased cost. That's just marketing. But it's our job to really, really manage that and try to be as efficient and responsible as we can to get the best result for our clients. And in this scenario, I did that, and I managed to decrease the CPL by 15%. So it was a win for everyone.